Thanks very much for joining us for today's webinar. In the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to the elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders. I'm lucky enough today to be speaking to you from Tangurung country, and let us know in the chat which land you're on today. My name's Nell Thompson. I'm the Secretary of the Australian Institute of Animal Management, and I'll be hosting the webinar for you today. I've been on the AIM committee since 2013, and I'm also the coordinator of the National Getting to Zero program. The Australian Institute of Animal Management, or AIM as we call it, is the national peak body representing local government animal management officers. The AIM committee consists of a wide range of professionals engaged in the various aspects of animal management. And AIM seeks to support those engaged in the business of animal management and the function itself by providing training and information, opportunities for networking and collaboration, and by encouraging the use of best practice, policy and practices. AIM understands the significant pressures placed on local government and related sector service providers when working in the companion animal management space. We welcome new members, and people can join via our website at www.aim.org.au. So to today's presentation, it's one I'm very much looking forward to. There'll be around 50 minutes of presentation and around 10 to 15 minutes of question time once the presentation is concluded. The recording of this webinar will be accessible via our website to all members to watch at any time. We're going to ask that everyone mutes themselves during the presentation, and if you have questions, you can start putting them in the Q&A section, and we'll get through as many as we can at the end of the session. If you have quick questions that relate to your understanding of the content, put your hand up. There's a button down the bottom of your screen, and we're happy to answer them during the presentation. If you have more questions or we don't get to yours during the question time, you can send a message to our Facebook page or to our email, and we'll get to it that way. I'm excited to welcome the dynamic duo of Hillenaar and Brandon Cowan as our presenters for today. Flick's got over 15 years of hands-on experience in the sector and a passion for improving the lives of companion animals one foster at a time. She's helped revolutionise shelter operations and foster care programs across Sydney and Melbourne, and currently works as the animal care and foster manager at Sydney Dogs and Cats Home. Holding a degree in animal sciences and numerous certifications in animal behaviour and sheltering practices, Flick is particularly passionate about expanding in-home care through foster programs, which she believes are key to not only increasing adoption rates, but also improving the lives of animals in care. Brandon is an experienced animal welfare professional with over 8 years in the animal shelter industry. As the foster care manager at Animal Welfare League New South Wales, he's developed and expanded foster programs and has placed an estimated 5,000 animals into temporary homes. Previously, as the animal rehoming officer for one of New South Wales' largest council pounds, he's played a key role in increasing adoptions and reducing euthanasia rates specifically for cats. He's also the creator of Find My Owner, a New South Wales-wide lost pet reunification service that has helped over 600 lost dogs return home in under a year, achieving an unprecedented 88% return home rate. And that, Brandon, is something we will look into another time a bit more, I think, because it's very, very interesting.
Sounds good.
He's passionate about helping councils implement programs to improve live outcomes for animals. So let's get started. Over to you two.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us. Flick, did you want to go to the next slide? There we go. Probably one more after that.
Yeah, we've kind of already, Nell's done the whole spiel.
Yeah, fantastic. So yeah, firstly, most of you probably already aware, so I'll just go through this quickly. What is a foster care program? So as you know, without a foster program, if you've got an animal shelter, the animals go to the shelter and they just sit in the shelter. And as we know, the longer animals are in shelters, the more they decline, the sadder it is for staff to see, the animals just come in, and over time they behaviorally decline, and it's not, always the best welfare outcomes for the animals when they're just sort of stuck in the shelter. So the alternative to that is a foster program. So that's recruiting people to temporarily look after dogs and cats and kittens while they're waiting to be adopted or go to rescue, or whatever the outcome is. Now, the idea of a foster program is it's in-home animal care. It's temporary. So the idea is not to place an animal from the shelter into a foster home and then just forget about them. The idea is it's temporary, and the animal should eventually get adopted or go to a rescue organisation. And it's also important that it's supported by staff, which we'll talk about shortly. Next slide, please.
I'll just add to that as well, just the temporary part of it. I think other places, we're looking at adoptions. We do that a little bit different because we're expecting the animal to be in the home, for life, for maybe 15 years, whereas these foster carers are only signing up to do temporary care. So the animal will eventually come back at some point. So you just have to keep that in mind, that returns are inevitable, whether it be for an adoption or just because the carers can't look after them. So that just kind of changes a little bit your thinking around foster.
Yeah, and I guess I'll add to what you've added. And I don't know if it's off topic or not, but around the whole thought process of returns. So previously, when I started in the animal industry nearly 10 years ago, if someone returned an animal, I had the mindset of, oh, it's the person's fault. They didn't give the animal enough time. It was just this. And I kind of my mentality at the time is, oh, it's the person, they've failed the animal.
Yeah.
And over time, I guess my mindset has changed. And from watching other webinars and other more experienced people than myself, that returns, the way I see it, particularly if an animal's adopted out and returned, it's kind of like a foster, really. So the animal's just got a break from the shelter. Sometimes adoptions don't work out. Sometimes when you place an animal in foster care, it doesn't work out. And a lot of the time, it's not actually the person's fault. It could be, the animal just wasn't a suitable match for the person. And, sometimes the shelter staff and or the adopter just didn't realize it at the time. And yeah, it's just like a break from the shelter, whether it's 1 day or 3 years.
That's it. Yeah. And that break can make a huge difference to an animal. So yeah, it's still good to keep in mind. And as you said, Brandon, like a lot of our foster officers, we have big chats about accepting returns, because you can take it quite personally and be like, oh no, I failed the animal, but they do happen. It's what the carers have signed up to, that it is just going to be temporary.
Yeah, even myself, I've put myself in. Probably 5-6 years ago, my family, when I was living with my parents, we adopted a puppy. And yeah, we thought it'd be easy. And then, yeah, it just, I won't go into all the details, it's not relevant, but yeah, it actually didn't work out, and we had to return the puppy. So yeah, it can happen to anyone. Yeah, don't judge me, try not to. So yeah, why should council start foster programs? So there's quite a number of reasons. We've found that it can increase the adoptions. So when you're stuck with adoptions, trying to think of other ways to get adoptions is actually starting foster programs. So I used to work for Blacktown Animal Holding Facility, which it's now Blacktown Animal Rehoming Centre, where they used to get nearly 6,000 animals a year. And when I started the foster program, I noticed a massive increase in adoptions of cats and kittens, which is what I focused on placing in foster. And the reason for that, sometimes foster carers end up adopting, probably really depends on the type of animal and a whole bunch of things, but probably about 30% of the animals that you place in foster homes actually get adopted. And by the fact that foster is temporary, it really lowers the barrier for someone to actually take that animal home compared to committing immediately to a permanent home. So you can get adoptions from that. And a lot of the time, particularly with kittens, the foster carers will find friends, family members, and people that they know, people they work with, to adopt those kittens and cats and dogs as well sometimes. So there's easy adoptions that you can get without you having to do any work.
I mean, even with dogs, like we have we actually have a volunteer who makes Adopt Me bandanas for us, and all the dogs go out with Adopt Me bandanas, and it's things like, you're walking your dog down the street with the Adopt Me bandana, it's free advertising. So yeah, there's been definitely dog adoptions through people seeing that or just talking to foster carers down the street.
Yeah, that's awesome. And also on that note as well, I found that it makes a big difference to encourage foster carers to actually go out and promote their animals. So
Yeah.
when I started at AWL, the foster program was very different, and foster carers actually weren't even allowed to post about the fact that they're fostering or their foster animals on social media, anything like that, in case something happened. So yeah, I changed that, and yeah, now it's totally the opposite. We want people to promote the animals. And yeah, again, it's just an easy way to get adoptions with pretty little effort. And yeah, so why else should councils start foster programs? Obviously, it's better for the animals rather than spending time in kennels than they're in loving foster homes. It's quite a lot cheaper for animals to be in foster homes. So often foster carers will be willing, particularly with cats and kittens, foster carers are often willing to pay for things like food, cat litter, toys, all the stuff to look after the animals. And you don't need to pay an animal attendant to look after the animal because it's in a home. It helps with compassion fatigue for staff as well. We all don't like to see our favorite animals. I mean, we love to see our favorite animals, but we don't like to see them in a kennel or in a cage for extended periods of time. So by seeing them in foster homes, laying on the couch and hanging out on the foster carer's stomach with little kittens and everything, or my big 4-year-old cat, she likes to do that. Then yeah, it's better for the staff as well. And animals, and in particular dogs and cats that might be a bit more timid, they're a lot less stressed in foster homes. Therefore, they are more adoptable, and you can get a lot more accurate information about the animal as well. So seeing a dog, in a kennel, that you walk past the kennel and it just jumps up the kennel and climbs the walls and barks all the time and goes mad. And then, where a lot of the staff will think, oh, who's going to adopt this animal? And then half the time that this sort of dog placed in a foster home, and within half an hour, the dog's just sleeping on the couch and relaxing. And you see a more accurate representation of what the animal is like in an actual home. So,
Yeah.
a few days in a home can give you a lot more information than months of an animal in the shelter, where the animal's behavior is going to decline and eventually become less rehomable.
And I think like a lot of the people that are hopefully watching this webinar at the moment, they might be AMOs, there might be, managers of companion animal teams, but maybe hopefully there are also other people within councils watching webinars like this, because I just want to touch on the obviously there's animal welfare benefits to this, which everyone I think is on board for, but there are massive cost saving elements to having a foster program. I work in an impounding facility at Sydney Dogs and Cats Home. Brandon, you mentioned at Blacktown Pound. Having a foster program just greatly decreases your costs associated with impounding animals. It is like essentially free housing. There's, of course, some administration costs and your foster officers. But the way, if you put it just in really simple terms, you might have 20 animal attendants looking after, however many dogs, whereas you only need one foster officer to look after the same amount of dogs. It's just greatly reduces your costs. And then in regard to the compassion fatigue, that's going to reduce massive costs associated with burnout of your staff. So your AMOs as well, none of them want to see animals being euthanized in shelters. So foster care programs greatly decreases euthanasia rates through a number of different processes. So yeah, I think things like reducing insurance costs, even reducing EAP needs. There's so many other benefits to it. And I think once you implement a program like this, you start seeing the benefits fairly quickly. People are often really shocked, and that's why I think foster programs are becoming a really big thing overseas as well. Of course, for the animal welfare benefits, but massive cost savings for communities and councils as well.
Yeah, and then also to put some of the numbers in perspective, so we've got two at Animal Welfare League. We've got a dog foster officer and a cat foster officer. The dog foster officer, so it's one staff member's wages, looks after, depends, but normally between about 30 and 55 dogs. And our cat foster officer, it depends on time of year and everything, but up to about 150-ish cats and kittens. Again, so it's two staff wages, very comfortably looking after about 200 animals. And yeah, and we don't need to pay for a lot of the stuff as well. Now, also in terms of, I think this could be a bit later on in the presentation, but I'll say it now anyway. In terms of the costs for things, so it would totally be up to the council as to what you want to pay for and not pay for. So in my previous role, working for a council, the foster program was very new and didn't have the resources to supply things for the foster carers. So the foster carers literally supplied everything, the bowls, the toys, the food, the litter, all of that stuff. All that the council provided was flea and worming treatment at the facility, and any medical things within reason within the council budget. And I don't think, maybe there might be data or something to say either this or otherwise, but from my experience, there was the fact that we weren't providing food and stuff for foster carers. It didn't really have, it had a very negligible impact on the number of foster carers that the program had. And there was almost all of the carers were repeat foster carers. So I thought that was quite interesting. Now I work for Animal Welfare League, where when I started, it was the opposite. We provided absolutely everything. So everything right down to bowls, litter trays, all that. I actually found that was kind of, for lack of a better term, not the best use of my time, getting bowls and things like that, when realistically they only cost like a few dollars from like Kmart or whatever. So I sort of try to strike a middle ground. So now what we do at Animal Welfare League is for things like, particularly for cats, like things like litter trays and bowls and bedding and toys, we tell foster carers we don't supply that. And then with food and cat litter, then we'll tell foster carers that if they're in a position to supply it, fantastic. And if they're not, then we can. And we find almost all of the foster carers supply the litter, and a lot of them want us to supply the food still, which is fine. And we always do if they want us to. And with dog food, that's generally more expensive. So we provide that. And we do provide a few more things for the dogs.
And anyone watching this, if they want a little bit more information about what Brandon and I do, we have slightly different methods of what we use, but the same underlying goal, I think, and values and morals behind the program is the same. But if anyone wants information, and we'll speak about it a bit later, but Brandon and I are more than happy to give our details and let you guys know what we do, what we've found is successful in our individual programs too.
Absolutely.
Cool. Risks. Do you want me to take this one, Brandon?
I
do. Brandon has worked a lot with the cats and done amazing stuff with cat programs, a little bit with dog stuff. I've done a lot with dog stuff. So I guess when it comes to risks, the first thing people think is dog bites or dog attacks. Of course, that's one thing as well. There are risks. So just listing here, things like cats escaping. We minimize that as much as possible, but when you have over 100 cats in foster, eventually one is bound to slip through the door or break open fly screen on a window and get out. So while that is, yes, a risk that we are willing to take, we also put in precautions to minimize that. And if it does, we've got a plan in place for what we do when that does happen. Dog and cat bites. Again, cats and dogs have teeth. These are animals that may have been in highly stressful situations or might not have adequate emotional control. So bites can happen. Again, we mitigate the risk as much as possible. So we have really stringent processes set up for that. So yes, I've dealt with many cat and dog bites in foster before. All of them, I believe, have been handled really well. And it's something we just manage as we go. Again, when you're getting so many animals in foster, it is one of those risks that we assess and we have a process for. I just want to point out there that you've still got significant risk when you've got a cat or a dog in shelter. In fact, your risk of a bite is way higher in a shelter. So I would rather take the very small occasional risk in foster and manage that really well. The foster carers are also aware of any risks involved before they take an animal, and that's got to be something that I think councils or also any other rescues that are watching keep in mind, that there is some ownership on when you foster an animal, that you are taking a risk yourself there. Same as any pet owner, you're always taking a risk that they might bite. Of course, we don't want that to happen, and we don't want to put them in that circumstance, but could happen. Foster carers stealing an animal. Yes, that actually happened to me once, where a foster carer stole a dog. That's very, very rare, but again, we have a process to handle that.
That's why you always make sure that they're microchipped before going to foster, so then you can write on the notes, animal has been stolen, and then hope that down the track you get contacted. But so even working, a lot of these risks, yes, they're of course risks we need to keep in mind. At the same time, all, as you've already mentioned, all of them have they happen at pounds. I've literally worked at a pound where someone's walked in, stolen a dog right in front of us. I've seen staff members get bitten. Animals that have been adopted, then returned, and then euthanized. All of this stuff, it already happens as well.
Yeah. Having to euthanize animals in foster. So yes, that's happened before as well. Again, I have a very open approach with our carers. We're very transparent with our carers, and actually we get really, really lovely feedback. My dog foster officer at the moment, she has had numerous stories of, I guess, like hugging and tearing moments with carers when they've come to euthanize a dog together. You know, that's a really hard thing to go through, but the support and love that we have within our community when we have to make a really difficult decision like that, it actually helps retain a lot of foster carers, and it looks really good for our organisation as well, that we're always putting the animals' welfare first, even if that means we have to make some really, really hard decisions. Destruction of property, yes, that happens too. Believe it or not, I would say, I don't know if Brandon, you would agree with this, but I would say the biggest culprits for that are rabbits. Rabbits in foster are a menace, but that's something that we just always warn foster carers about, and make sure that they have plenty of enrichment for their rabbits so they don't go for their skirting boards or their doors. But again, that's something that the foster carers agree to when they take an animal as part of the foster agreement. Infection and control. Yes, we've definitely had times where there's been a classic one for me is ringworm, actually. I don't know, Brandon, if you can share any stories. Have you ever had like pan-luke or parvo or anything like that?
Yeah. So I've got lots of stories. So yeah,
so many stories.
So I guess, yeah, it's just about setting the expectations and letting people know the potential risks and how to mitigate against those risks. So, for example, with pan-luke, for example, we don't knowingly place cats and kittens into homes where people have they don't have vaccinated cats and kittens, and likewise we won't place puppies in foster homes where people have got unvaccinated dogs. Do we ask for vet evidence or certificates or anything for those for the evidence that they're vaccinated? No, we don't. We ask them, and we'll talk about this a little bit later with lowering the barriers. Likewise with cat flu, a lot of cats and kittens will come down with cat flu, and dogs might have kennel cough. So it's just about setting expectations, trying to set the foster care up for success. And for example, with cats and kittens, we advise people, hey, this cat or kitten looks to be healthy, but it could be incubating a disease. These are some of the common diseases. We recommend for the first 2 weeks that they're kept in a room with hard floors, and yeah, wash your hands after patting them. Don't let your animals interact with them, particularly for the first 2 weeks.
We don't do that.
What's that? Sorry?
We don't do that. We don't quarantine at all.
I always recommend it. The percentage of people that follow my recommendations is, I'm not sure how high that is. Some staff are also the culprits, including myself, but it's best practice and what we recommend when considering, potentially getting these diseases. Like the one time we had a foster carer, she must have like, I don't know, maybe an autoimmune disease or something. her whole like arm and her face just absolutely covered with ringworm. But
Oh,
this is like
wow.
yeah. It's happened once out of I placed over 5,000 animals in foster, so it's very, very rare. Occasionally, people might get like one ringworm spot or something. Ringworm, it's not, you know, some really bad disease. You're not gonna die from it or anything. You just put a bit of cream on. Foster carers generally they don't expect you to do anything. It's not that serious, and it's one of the main things that can spread. So it's not the outcome if someone was to get it. It's really not that bad. And
keeping in mind too that the animals recover way faster in foster than they're going to in a shelter. So yeah, I mean, we've even got some carers who are like our ringworm carers now, because they're sort of like, oh, well, it's been in my house already. I may as well just keep like fostering ringworm animals.
Yeah. Sorry, could you just go back a little bit?
Yeah.
Yeah, so just also wanted to just add a few points regarding destruction of property and also having to euthanize an animal that was in foster. So it's, as Felix said, it's sort of about managing the expectations. So for example, if we're placing a random friendly dog or cat in foster, we generally won't sort of be upfront about the, I guess that maybe not the right wording, we won't warn people that there could be euthanasia typically, if it's very unlikely that what we are going to place with them is not likely to be euthanized. If it might be a dog with, for lack of a better term, questionable behavior, or there might be, I guess, a risk of euthanasia, then we're very, very upfront about that. And it's also, as probably people are aware, it's always best to be honest. So in a situation, if the animal does get euthanized or it's about to get euthanized, depending on the situation, we might contact the foster carer and give them a heads up even. And yeah, we find it's very important to be transparent and honest about all of that. With things like destruction of property, we've got a pretty detailed foster agreement that basically says we're not responsible, but we're also reasonable at the same time. So if there was something where you know, we really should be reimbursing the foster carer for whatever, then we do. It really happens very rarely. It's not a big cost. I think we've maybe reimbursed a foster carer maybe once or twice in the past.
I don't think I've ever reimbursed a foster carer, and it's never been really an issue. Like I do refer to the agreement if they question it more, but most people are pretty understanding, and I just apologize. I'm so sorry that's happened. What can we do to help you, or do you need to bring the animal back? But yeah, it's not really been an issue. And yeah, as you said, Brandon, we've been doing this for years and never really had an issue there.
Yeah, and I was like a once or twice off out of, I've been doing this for nearly a decade. I'll also just touch on the things in the webinar chat. So the one person mentioned that we need to ensure that council's values are upheld, and we're respecting the roles of the foster carers, and we're not just shifting the cost from council to foster carers.
Absolutely.
So yeah, absolutely agree. Couldn't agree anymore. In terms of that, and I guess I guess when I started the foster program for Blacktown Council, I'm not sure if anyone expected it to grow as big as it did. Like at its peak, it had about 250 cats and kittens in foster. And at the time, I had to just manage my time. And also, I see Blacktown as one of the more proactive councils. They had the foster program nearly 10 years ago, which is fantastic. And no one sort of knew how to do it. I kind of just made it as to what it is, as to what it was at the time. But yeah, totally agree with you. And I guess also some councils, to put it bluntly, would see that as a big benefit. And yeah, I don't think we should be just recruiting people and just shifting all the cost onto people. For some councils, that might be the thing that pushed them over the line to actually have a foster program, and then potentially change things. But yeah, I do agree that ideally the cost shouldn't be pushed onto foster carers for absolutely everything. I think some costs actually should be, and some effort. So for example, at Animal Welfare League, one of the reasons why we do get people, particularly cat and kitten carers, to supply the bedding, toys, litter trays and bowls, that stuff, it's really not very expensive. You can get it for like $15, $20, but it puts some responsibility onto the foster carer. So then they're going to be more likely to, if something gets hard or the kitten's got diarrhea, they're going to be less likely to just throw their hands up and be like, okay, you've given me everything, so I'll just give it all back. They've got a little bit of skin in the game. And in terms of Nell saying she'd love to explore the barriers to foster programs, so we have got that later in the presentation.
Yeah, we better keep moving, otherwise we're going to run out of time, Brandon.
Sounds good.
So the risk of not having a foster program is greater, and that's kind of what we touched on earlier. Your adoption rates are up, your euthanasia rates are down, your compassion fatigue's down, your cost in general of running companion animal services is down. You get, less stressful staff and animals. And as we touched on beforehand, you're likely to have a lot worse outcomes if you keep animals in shelters, both for people and animals. So you're more likely to have safety issues with the staff handling those animals, and you're more likely to have some not so great outcomes. Length of stay, it greatly affects the emotional and the medical welfare of an animal. So the sooner you can get them out of shelters, the better it is for them, and the better it is for the people all around them. We're not just talking about your AMOs or your animal attendants. We're talking about everyone. That includes your companion animal services managers, even other people, stakeholders in and outside of council. It has a domino effect. So, yeah, I think it's absolutely essential. I'm a little bit biased, but foster programs is definitely where the future of animal care is going. So key things that council should know when you're starting out a foster program. Brandon and I recommend that you do start with healthier cats and kittens. They are just kind of easier to get your program up and running. There's several things about your program that will need to work nicely. So when you're first starting out, we just say set yourself up for success and start with the easier animals. Have one staff member assigned to the foster program. Yes, you only need one, believe it or not, to begin with, just to get everything set up. And again, Brandon and I will touch on that later, but you'll need a foster agreement, a sign-up form, a basic foster guide, a bit of a SOP document. That all sounds a little bit scary, but Brandon and I have all of that already set up. You just copy it and put your branding on it.
We want you to steal it.
Yes, we want you to steal it. We
There's
do.
no point reinventing the wheel.
Brandon and I would absolutely love to see foster programs all across the country. Sharing is caring. We're all in it for animal welfare. So again, reach out to us if we can help. Do you want to touch on that, Brandon, the rules?
Sure. So yeah, with the rules, we always need to try and strike a balance between bombarding foster carers with way too much information and then they listen to nothing, which is also relevant to people adopting animals. We just bombard them with everything and then nothing sinks in. So we try and have a few simple rules. So with cats, we explain to foster carers that they must stay inside at all times. They can't go outside for any amount of time for any reason, other than in a carrier to the vet clinic or whatnot. And dogs are not allowed in off-leash dog parks, and they're not allowed in dog parks, and they're not allowed to be off-leash if they're off the person's property. We make it very clear that they can only go to our approved vet clinic or vet clinics. They can't go to their own local vet because they don't have the processes and discounts and whatnot in place. It's very important to have an emergency procedure. So if there's an after-hours emergency, what will happen? So yeah, it just depends on whatever the process is. That would be up to the council to decide. And I've mentioned, we don't need to supply things like bowls, trays, etc. for those things that are typically cheap. I'd recommend in general not supplying it, but it just depends on the area and number of foster carers that you're.
Yeah, with dogs, it's a bit funny. I do supply quite a bit for dogs. Things like chews is really important for the first 3 days of a dog being in a home. But yeah, I mean, as we've written here, it's really up to the individual council. They can take recommendations for both what Brandon and I do.
Yeah, and also so our dog foster officer she does things a little bit more like you, Flick, as well, and she does provide more things in general as well. So yeah, I guess there's also some slight differences between dogs and cats. And there's a million ways to do a foster program as well. So yeah, some of the other considerations, it's important to have your foster person texting. So a lot of people, including myself sometimes, are not always on top of our emails. So yeah, if you contact people, if someone applies to foster or if someone's interested in fostering, it's generally best to call them if possible. And then also once they're an existing foster carer, try and text them. You'll get much quicker responses. And
yeah, I just want to emphasize on that as well. There's been some different councils that I've spoken to over the years still want to really go towards emailing services. Yeah, I mean, of course, it's up to the individual councils, but you just will not get the same sort of response as texting. We've also set up like a Google Messages, so we can use our PCs to text rather than our little handsets, which is a really, really easy system. You've got multiple people that can access that as well. And you can do large texting services as well. So you can mass text to a number of different people. Yeah, it's just we found it's way more successful than email. So just keeping that in mind.
Yeah, like you can send an email to like 100 foster carers in your system. Say, hey, we need a foster carer for this animal. You might get 1 or 2 replies. If you send a bulk text to 100 people, you'll probably get 15 responses. So it does make a big difference. Now, as Nell hinted on, reducing barriers for people wanting to foster. So that is super, super important. So just like with adoptions, I like to have the mentality of this person wants to help, and we try and match them with an animal rather than they've come to apply to foster and we need to see if they're suitable and worthy of one of our animals. So we try and be friendly, have a very inclusive way of running our foster programs without judgment. Some of the things we don't do house visits. We've got a legacy program, which is that's not relevant to this I guess discussion, where we do house visits but for a standard foster home, we don't do house visits. I don't think doing a house visit is very helpful whatsoever if a foster care is suitable. So you might do a house. Now, some of the reasons for that, you might do a house visit one day, the person seems great, the house is absolutely clean, and I hope not, but they could kick a dog. And all their house might be really clean and great for that day, and then a week later, they bring in like 20 cats from some other place,
I think it's even the small things as well. Like the way Brandon and I run our programs is really inclusive. It's not judgmental. We're not vetting people. I've even changed wording with foster programs. Things like our application form isn't called an application form. It's called a sign-up form. Our foster manual is not called a manual. It's called a foster guide. They're all words to make it inclusive and friendly to not scare people away. And that's what the barriers is all about. Every single part of the foster program welcomes people in. We have an open conversation, so it's open fostering to ask people, what's your situation? So the very first question we ask people when we call them is, oh, I see you'd like to foster with us. That's awesome. Tell me a bit about yourself. Why are you looking to foster? And then they'll create the picture for us rather than having set expectations and telling them what they, really can and can't do and have strict rules. It just turns away people. And yes, some people might think that sounds a little bit scary, but believe it or not, it means we get a much bigger pool of foster carers. Brandon and I have incredible recruitment rates of foster carers because of this approach. And we've been doing it for a long time, and there's still very minimal risks, or if, like we touched on before, those risks are mitigated. So it might sound scary, but believe us, it does work.
Yeah, absolutely. And also one more note about the house checks as well. Because when I started at AWL, that was the rule. You have to do a house check for everyone. And I was finding someone would sign up to foster, and it could take a week or so to actually line up a day and time that worked for me and the foster carer. And if they work full time or their schedule didn't align with my schedule, it would take a week. And then by that stage, half the people are no longer interested.
Yeah.
Or you can do a house visit, everything's great, they foster an animal, and then they return the animal 2 days later, and you've just wasted a lot of your time and theirs as well.
I mean, versus the alternative that we have now, which is you call up, oh, cool, can you come pick up an animal tomorrow? And they're like, what? Or this afternoon, we've just had a litter of kittens come in. How about you come in an hour? And then the kitten's length of stay is 1 hour.
Yeah, and like with our dog foster officer, she'll typically ask for pictures of the yard just to help her get an idea as to the type of dog that might be suitable. So that could be used as an alternative for people who are, I guess, a bit nervous about not doing a house check. We don't do reference checks, vet checks, any of that. That's total waste of everyone's time, and doesn't, in my opinion, doesn't really help with anything. As I mentioned before, we don't do physical vaccination checks. We don't look at like vaccination records of existing animals in the home. However, we do simply ask them if we've got a puppy or a dog that's been placed in a home with other dogs, then we say, are your dogs up to date with vaccinations? And likewise, if we're placing a kitten or a cat in a foster home, we'll simply ask them, are your cats up to date with vaccinations? And yeah, dogs are usually fine in apartments as well. Even medium, large dogs might be totally fine, as long as their needs are being met. You know, they're getting walked, they're, you know, getting lots of toys, all of that sort of stuff.
Actually, we've got some pretty funny stories of it happens quite regularly with our dog foster officer that people put on our form that they only want to foster dogs under 10 kilos. So if anyone knows, that's a really small dog. So the first conversation that we have with them when we do our first call is, oh, I see you'd only like to foster dogs that are under 10 kilos. Can I ask why? And often the response is, oh, we live in an apartment. I said, okay, so what is it about living in an apartment that you think a larger dog wouldn't cope with? And often the response is, oh, I just don't know. Don't they need the exercise, yada, yada. And our response is, yeah, definitely they do, but so does a small dog. And often the analogy that I use is you can have a very energetic, maybe over-aroused Jack Russell who won't cope well in confinement like an apartment, and you can have a really lazy Great Dane that would absolutely love an apartment. So it's not so much about size, it's more about temperament of the individual animal. And that's what we say to the carers as well, that we'll match you up with a dog that we think would suit that environment. And often those people that put in forms saying that they want under 10 kilos, we then change to wanting dogs up to 25, 30 kilos, and they often do go for larger dogs. So yeah, you can definitely have dogs in apartments.
Yeah, absolutely. Even just before I started working in the animal industry, I was fostering dogs back in the day. Now I'm more of a cat I like dogs as well, but yeah, now I foster cats. But yeah, I fostered dogs, and yeah, I was in a little 75-meter square apartment, and yeah, I fostered a Staffy cross, and then another one Staffy cross, might have been a pit bull. Yeah, they were totally fine just because they were matched up with me at the time, and they're really chilled out dogs with a really gentle temperament.
And sometimes it's what they prefer. Sometimes
yeah, and to be honest, they did better in the apartment compared to a Jack Russell cross that I had that had separation anxiety and complaints from neighbours. I had to, yeah, it worked out in the end, but yeah, that yeah, the larger dogs are actually more suitable. So one of the other considerations I want to just talk about is just keeping on top of checking in with foster carers. So it's great to place animals in foster homes. That's the goal. However, it is just as important to keep on top of where those animals are at, making sure that they get the vaccinations on time, any medical appointments, they get desexed as soon as possible and practical, and they're made available for adoption as soon as possible and practical, and they're actively getting promoted, because otherwise what you don't want is to place animals in foster homes and then you just forget about them and they just get forgotten. So I think we're running a good time, 5 to 10 minutes left, and we've got a little bit of stuff to get through. So
oh shoot, okay, let's go. Oh no, that was it.
No, how to get foster carers. Okay, I'll talk about it. And then, yeah, just
I was like, okay, we go.
Yeah, no, add whatever you want, interrupt me when you want. So yeah, some of the ways to get foster carers. So it's all great and everything. Have a foster program sounds fantastic. Well, how do you get them? So firstly, as we've already touched on, we like to make it very easy. It's very important to have an online sign-up form. So we highly don't recommend sending a big Word document, because then someone's going to have to print it out, scan it back, take pictures of it, or type on top of it, and they're going to be less likely to do it. Yeah. And people typically take a lot longer than if they just fill out an online form. So we highly recommend an online form. You can,
and again, this is something Brandon and I can help you set up. It's really, really easy, an online form. Don't get scared by it. Yeah, something that can be really easily set up.
Yeah, absolutely. And then a lot of councils might have their own preferred online form based on whatever they use. So you could even, depending on the council, you might have an IT team that could assist you with it as well. But yeah, Flick and I are also happy to assist. You can ask your volunteers if your council's got a volunteer program. You can ask your people who already volunteer to see if they might be interested in fostering. You can do social media posts. You'll have a very large list of people, hopefully, who've adopted from your shelter. So you can contact them via email, text, call them, see if they might be interested in fostering as well. And one of the most effective things, and this is something that, not to toot my own horn, but I think I did quite well when I worked for Blacktown Council, when foster kittens in particular, or cats, when they came back to the shelter / vet clinic for desexing, I would ask the foster carers at that time, and sometimes a day or two before, to give them a little bit of notice. And by the end of it, they were just expecting it. I asked them, hey, we've got these other kittens. They just come in, or they came in yesterday. Can you foster them? And then when they drop off, then they can pick up more. And then it saves the foster carer from having to do an extra trip as well.
Yeah.
At the same time, we're always mindful that we don't want to burn out our foster carers. Some of them just love just back-to-back fostering. Others, they do want a little bit of a break here and there.
Yeah.
And one thing as well, once you do have a foster program up and running, is finding new foster carers. It can be a challenge. When you do the things that I just mentioned, you will get them. And it can actually be easier to use your existing foster carers rather than, it's always important to recruit new foster carers, because you're always going to be losing foster care. People will drop off, they'll move away, their circumstance will change, so you'll always lose foster carers. So it's always important to actively recruit more, but it can be much easier to simply use your existing foster carers as well. So after you've got your foster program going for a while, you'll build up a database of people, and if you just text them or call them, don't email. I mean, you can email, but you probably won't get a reply. If you text them, call them, then yeah, they can be easy to use as well. And yeah, the expectations of foster carers. So with that in mind, foster carers are not expert dog trainers. They're not expert cat trainers. They're normal people like us. And sometimes people might not follow all of our rules, depending on which rules they are. If there's something like, they've let a cat outside, then, I'm not going to fire them, but I'll give them a stern warning and say, hey, look, we can't do that. It's not part of our rules. Please, in future, keep the cat inside. Or if we see a picture of them posting like on that note as well, we've also got a foster Facebook group as well, where people love to just post happy updates and whatnot. And we find that helps to build a sense of community with these people who otherwise they just kind of take the animal and only speak to us. But yeah, they're normal humans. So if people don't always do the right thing, or they think they're doing the right thing, but they're not, give them some slack. And where possible, we always try and make sure that our foster carers have got a good experience. And the first animal that we place with a particular foster carer, we try and make it, for lack of a better term, an easier animal, even if they're more capable of taking a more difficult one, because we want that first one to be a good experience. If they take an animal and it's a bad experience, they're not going to foster for us again. One thing I would like to add before Flick can add whatever she wants, so we can go into question time. It's not as much work as you think. So when I started for Blacktown Council, one of my first things, my boss at the time, he said, part of your job, you need to start the foster program. And I really hesitated. I didn't see the value in it. No one did this sort of presentation to me. I was just told, oh, do a foster program.
Figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah, like we need to do it. And I resisted for quite some time, probably nearly a year. And I just didn't want to do it. I didn't sort of know what was involved. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be more work. I'm going to be managing more animals on top of my thing. So I resisted for 6 to 12 months. And eventually I reluctantly put together a basic agreement and a few little things. And then I started the foster program, and it actually made my work kind of like easier. And yeah, it was really good for me to see as a council worker. It was really good to see these animals in loving foster homes and having a very good time, getting raised properly. They become more adoptable, and just getting more adoptions half the time without me doing anything other than just placing the animal in foster homes. And yeah, it was actually, yeah, I had one regret, and that's not doing it sooner.
And the other thing I think that Brandon, you and I would both say, if we had this webinar again and had all the resources that you and I have created, it would be even faster. It would be even easier. So for all the counsellors out there, that if you guys are interested in it, which I hope you are, yeah, there's no point in reinventing the wheel. By all means, reach out for resources and we can help you set it up. It'll be a lot faster. I had similar experience, Brandon, coming into Sydney Dogs and Cats Home. My main purpose starting there was to build the foster program. Because I'd already done it at AWL, it was very quick and easy. Within 8 months, we had a fully functioning and very successful foster program. That I had to actually start from the beginning because I didn't have the resources. So it would be faster for other people that wanted to use our resources.
Yeah.
Should we go into questions, Nell? Is that where we're at, going into question time, or?
Yes, we absolutely can. Thank you so much for that, guys. That's a huge amount of information. Oh, look, and your phone numbers as well. That is amazing. Good on you. If anybody's got any questions, please pop them in the Q&A so I can pick them up. I'd really like to know so for the people that are here, what are the barriers to you implementing foster programs if you haven't done that already? So you may have already done that and you might be here to pick up tips or, whatever. But what are the barriers for local government specifically in implementing a program like this? Because we've got Brandon and Flick here now. Ask them the questions that you have so that we can, work through these issues. I've got someone in the chat saying our council's concerned about the risk insurances and what ifs. Okay, so are you able to, what I might do is see if I can unmute you. I'm not sure what your name is. Jay Kepler. I think I've unmuted you, but please go ahead and talk to us more about what those risks are. If you can. If you're
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yeah.
perfect.
Oh, excellent. Okay, hi, my name's Jasmine Kapler. I'm South Australia West Torrens Council.
Awesome.
And we've been struggling with this issue. We have a small little pound of 6 kennels. We've no fostering or adoption program, and RSPCA and AWL have closed to accepting dogs. So we often just scramble and try and find like scruffer lovers or someone that will rehome our dog, meaning that the dog's sitting there for a long period of time. And we haven't even started with cats yet. Our biggest issue that we come up with is that our council say no because of the risk, and does our insurances cover it? Should we be playing in this space at all? Which I obviously think we should, but yeah, they're probably the biggest barriers I've been facing myself.
Do you know what the specific risks are that they're concerned about?
Mainly at the start, they say, are we even insured to be playing this? And then, they kind of are saying, is this actually our role as council as well? So there is some kind of debate there about if we should be taking this on, which we have to, because in the end of the day, RSPCA and AWL are not accepting the animals from us. Yeah. So they're just sitting in our kennels until we can scramble to find a solution, which isn't a solution.
No, the landscape that you're working in is definitely changing.
Yes, and because in South Australia, no one's really doing it as yet, except for the rural councils, and us being a metropolitan council, we don't want to be the first. We want someone else to go first, but we're the ones that are most affected.
Well, yeah. we can be your first.
Yes, I love that.
Just copy us and say, look, this is what they're doing. Like Brandon and I've manage very big foster programs. So if you're starting with something like 6 kennels, that's gold. To give you an idea, we have an average at Sydney Dogs and Cats Home of 100 new carers that sign up a month. So that's, a big pool of people to choose from. In South Australia, if you're metropolitan, I assume you're in Adelaide?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, look, I mean, maybe not 100, but I would think you'd definitely still have quite a lot of carers, maybe looking more at 50 carers a month. That's across dogs and cats. You could have those 6 dogs out of your kennel pretty quickly. And I guess to what Brandon spoke about earlier too is once you put an animal into foster, just a reminder, it's temporary, right? So there are animals incoming, you need to have an outgoing as well. So even though they won't be in the kennel, they still will be in temporary care. So I'd also be questioning what's happening with the outgoing. Are your adoption rates not happening as fast too? But going back to the risks that your counsellor is talking about, I agree with Nell. I'd be breaking that down and go, what are the risks? And then if they're talking about their obligation as a council, well, council need to be a community support organisation, and animals are very much part of our community, especially in metropolitan areas around Sydney, around Australia. We have huge numbers of cats and dogs, and they're accelerating those numbers. So I think it's definitely a responsibility of the council, but to not scare them away, tell them to come speak to us, or you come speak to us, and we can get a plan together, and we can show them the sort of risks that are involved and how we mitigate those risks. And it's quite easy.
Yeah,
that's
also,
I'd appreciate it.
And also I mean, they're the ones they've asked about the insurance. I would go back to them and say, well, what insurance? I'm just assuming that the council as a whole would have some sort of insurance for volunteers. So I would go back and ask them to review what that says about volunteers and how the existing insurance covers it, because for all we know, the insurance might already cover it. And yeah, as we kind of touched on before, the risk of not having a foster program, so the risk to the staff of the longer dogs that are in kennels in particular, yeah, cats as well, but yeah, more for dogs. The longer dogs are in kennels, they go crazy. There's a greater risk that then obviously they get more stressed. There's a greater risk to the staff for getting bitten, and that's actually a safety hazard for the staff. And then they're more likely to get bitten, go on workers' comp. That will cost the council, a lot. If it hasn't happened yet, it might happen, and it's going to be more likely to happen without an adoption program, without a foster program, where the animal can simply be adopted to a home where it will permanently be the responsibility of someone else, or a foster program where the animal will be less stressed, therefore less likely to bite someone. So yeah, I think it's actually more risky for them in the current situation, not having an adoption or foster program.
And sorry, it just does sometimes, because I get that question a lot. What about the risks? It's almost just an easy way out to say no, because Brandon and I have lived it. We've done it multiple times, and yeah, there's risks, but it's very easily mitigated. That's like saying, I'm not going to walk down the street because there's a risk I might get hit by a car. Yeah, there is, but I could just walk on the pavement and then it won't happen. It's the same sort of thing. So if councils really do seriously want to have that chat, yeah, we can definitely help them to mitigate all those risks. But yeah, I think it's definitely worth pushing there, because as Brandon touched on, not having a foster program, your animal numbers will go up. Animal numbers across Australia are going up. So by not having a foster program, your situation in shelters and in impounding, it's only going to get worse.
And the risk, like with community expectations, they expect for lost animals to be treated humanely, get adopted, not just obviously don't know your specific shelter or anything, but the community as a whole don't expect animals to just go to a shelter and just sit there while the shelter staff have to just try and work out ways to get the animals out with their hands essentially tied behind their back, which it kind of sounds like that's similar to your situation. So yeah. And then the community's expectations of a dog coming in or a cat coming in, and then because there's no foster or adoption program, then that animal gets euthanized. I've seen it so many times where an animal has been found, it's posted on social media, and then no one claims to be the owner, so that animal goes to the shelter, and then that animal gets euthanized, and then that shelter and the shelter staff and whoever euthanized the animal just gets hammered on social media. So if there's higher euthanasia as a result of not having even an adoption or a foster program, that's a huge risk to the council's reputation, which could be fixed by having an adoption or a foster program. And if you'd like to set up a meeting or anything with Flick, myself, anything with us or people at council, we'd be very happy to get involved.
That's
thank you. Appreciate that,
guys. That's incredible. And it sounds like for every scenario and every question that you guys have talked about, and in fact the whole program itself is about building a relationship with the community. So even to the discussions you have with them, what you give them, it's all about treating the community like they're adults and they're interested in what you're doing, and really building an actual relationship with them rather than council just sitting as a silo and not sort of engaging with the community on these issues. That sort of methodology isn't working anymore. You know, the community, as you say, Brandon, the expectations are completely different. They understand where their money's going. They understand more and more about what council does and how they do it. And so they're expecting more, and they're not unreasonable expectations, but it's only by building that relationship and having really decent conversations, human to human, that we can get a lot of this stuff sorted out. And everything that you guys have talked about today, I think, really feeds into that. So thank you so much for your time. It's been an incredible presentation. Your offer to support, you know, anybody who wanting to work in this space and develop something is invaluable. As you say, the resources that you guys have got, let's not reinvent the wheel. It's all there. Talk to the experts. Let's just, you know, get it started, really is the main thing. So thank you so much, everybody, for attending. Please keep an eye on our social media and e-news for upcoming webinars. And if you've got suggestions on topics that you'd like to cover or presenters that you would like to see speak, then do let us know. But thank you so much, Flick and Brandon, for all your hard work today and everything that you do. We really appreciate it. And enjoy the rest of the day, everybody. Thanks very much for coming along.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for having us. Thanks everyone for coming.
See you later. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.
See ya.